new hallucination tutorial dropped. I mean, it kind of dropped a while ago because I don't know how I came across this. I don't even remember, but I found this shitty, unsecure website a while back called bio.net. And it's kind of just a website for scientists, I think, to like post random articles on shit. It was kind of active in the 90s, but it seems it's not really used anymore. And I found this article from 1996 called How to Generate Controlled Hallucinations. And it was written by this guy named Claude de Contrecoeur. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It's kind of like a French name or some shit. And he goes by many names, okay? Very mysterious. I'll get into that later. But as the name suggests, this whole article was just how to generate hallucinations. And I don't mean like visualizations or good visualization skills. I mean closed eye hallucinations. So you'll be able to generate any image behind your closed eyelids, whatever you want. And it's pretty simple. I guess obviously like all the other hallucination tutorials, it will take some time, it will take some practice, but he does give simple step-by-step instructions. There is some kind of sciencey shit in it. I'm not getting into that because I'm fucking retarded. I'm retarded and I don't know what half of it means. I'll just focus on the instructions. And he also said he got children. He mentions that several times. He got children to do this fairly easily. Obviously, maybe it's easier for children to hallucinate things because like they can imagine things better, right? But children can do it, so I'm sure you can do it, okay? But let's just get straight into it. The first step to generating closed eye hallucinations, according to this guy. Also, I should mention as well, which I'll talk about later, the whole point of this thing was to actually help with lucid dreaming. He talks about this, and he has a whole other, like a whole fucking book, which is really in depth, that he wrote in the 90s. So he's kind of one of the OG lucid dreamers. And he wrote this whole thing on how to have what he called conscious dreams and lucid dreams and whatever. And so if you kind of get down this hallucination thing, it should make getting lucid dreams easier if you follow his method. So the first step to generate controlled hallucinations is to focus on the darkness behind your eyelids for 1 or 2 hours, bro. 1 or 2 hours. This guy just wants you to sit there and look at the darkness, kind of see the static, the colors that I've kind of talked about before. Focus on that for 1 or 2 hours. And he talks about if you kind of start focusing on this darkness, you will eventually enter a pre-hallucogenic state that you can enter using psychedelic drugs, but he says you don't need this. I think he has some experience with psychedelics, right? But he says you don't need this. You can observe the darkness and you enter this hallucinogenic state. So it kind of reminds me of hypnagogia, right? The state before you go to sleep, when you kind of start having all those hallucinations. And he says if you kind of focus on an image, which he uses a rose as an example in the article, as an example of something like focus on and try and hallucinate. He says if you try and focus your visual just focus visually on a rose. And what I mean by that is don't imagine the rose in your head. Actually try and see it in the darkness behind your closed eyelids, right? Literally try and see it. He says if you try and do this, at first you won't see the rose, obviously, and it will kind of seem like it's behind your head or something. But he says with a lot of focus, you can succeed in moving the rose or whatever image you think of to be not behind your head, but in front of your eyes. And when you do that, you will kind of see a faint, transparent outline of it. So this is kind of different. It's kind of more vague than my Linus's advanced vision control, which I've talked about. And in that tutorial for generating these hallucinations, my Linus kind of said, I don't know if you know what I'm fucking talking about, but it's just a whole other like hallucination tutorial thing. There's so many of these at this point. But in that other one, he was talking about actually rearranging the static you see behind your closed eyelids. This one is more vague in that he actually says just by focusing on and observing the darkness, kind of like meditating in a way, you will actually just kind of get hallucinations by themselves. He says getting reiterated images, which are random hallucinations, which you're not controlling. So unlike the rose, reiterated images are hallucinations that your brain is kind of just cycling through. He says these are much easier to get and will just happen if you observe the darkness for a long time. Now there is some fucking there is some sciencey shit. I know I said I wouldn't get into it because I'm retarded, but I should mention this. He says specific hallucinations, right, are harder to generate because you need to activate metabolically a memory zone where the rose is stored in an inactive form due to low metabolism. Like, I have no fucking idea what that means, right? And then he says the specific hallucination, like the image you want on purpose, is called a disattenuation. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And the way you get a specific hallucination is by maintaining the metabolism of a memory zone. And that's why it's harder to do that. I don't know exactly what that means. I think, long story short, that just means if you're able to focus your full intention on a rose or whatever image it is, you will be able to more easily hallucinate that shit. I think that's what he's trying to say. And he said, yeah, if you get to a point where you're able to like move the image from behind your head to the front of your eyes, when you look at it, it will kind of disappear and you won't be able to look at it for a long amount of time. And he also said when you get to this like hallucinogenic or pre-hallucogenic state after observing the darkness, it will kind of like make you realize that the darkness is not flat and it's three-dimensional. He also said at this point, if you focus on a face that you know, you will be able to like look at it and see it in very clear details. But if you focus on a face you don't know, it will kind of start morphing into like a bunch of different shit. I hope this all makes sense. It's really kind of weird and complicated and a little more vague than other hallucination tutorials, but it's just interesting because of like the mysterious aura around it. Like, I just found it off some shitty unsecure website, right? And it sounds similar to the hypnagogic state. And I couldn't really find more information on the guy. I didn't find a lot of information on him, but I'll talk about that later. Also mentions he got children in Tahiti in 1985 to observe the darkness and be able to like generate these hallucinations by themselves. Tahiti, bro. Red Dead 2 Redemption reference. That game is so fucking good. Oh, hold on. That game is so good. But he also wrote, like I said earlier, a whole article on lucid dreaming, or what he called conscious dreaming, which kind of links in to this whole hallucination thing. And this is a whole other fucking topic. He wrote this whole book on lucid dreaming, but he actually said the term lucid dreaming was wrong, and he said it should be called conscious dreaming. He didn't really elaborate on that, but I'm just gonna call it lucid dreaming because fuck it. I say what I want, bro. It's lucid dreaming, okay? But he called the dream world endo-reality, if I'm correct, and the real world exo-reality. So he came up with all these terms. And it's funny because this guy is kind of like one of the OG lucid dreamers. If we look at his article, it was written in the 90s. I don't know the exact date. The hallucination thing was 1996. But it's funny because in the West, we obviously just read a lot of Stephen LaBerge. He's kind of like the OG lucid dreamer, right? But this Cloud guy, he was writing shit in the 90s as well. He wrote stuff ages ago and it was really in depth. I guess his stuff wasn't as accessible to the mainstream. Firstly, because he was French and so he kind of had to translate it and the translations may be wrong. But I was also reading there's a lot of like really sciencey shit in there because if I'm correct, he was like a biologist or something. I don't really know. But basically the whole thing in his conscious dreaming article or book was that we don't need virtual reality if we can learn to enter the endo-reality or whatever and lucid dream, which is right, that's correct. And he kind of gives his method for entering a lucid dream, which involves the whole hallucination thing. So if you're able to generate the controlled hallucinations, you will be able to easily do his method. And his method is really much more complex than like the lucid dreaming methods we use now, but still it's interesting because it's kind of cool. We get like a look into the OG lucid dreaming methods, and his whole thing is basically do the controlled hallucination thing every night. He says spend like 30 minutes or an hour before bed just laying in bed observing the darkness and trying to like generate those hallucinations. He also mentions you should focus on something sexual to like keep your attention or something. Like you should try and generate sexual images. And then once you do that, you're gonna go to sleep normally, wake up 4 to 6 hours after sleep, dream journal any dreams you remember, and then go back to sleep and do the hallucination thing again. And this will kind of, if you're able to do this, you may end up having a wake-induced lucid dream, basically. So if you're able to fall asleep while generating these hallucinations, you will be aware as you're entering a dream, because you're basically inducing or being aware of the pre-sleep hypnagogic state. So it's basically, long story short, his things are kind of more complex, wake-initiated, wild, lucid dream method. I don't really see the point in doing it now, but it's interesting, I guess. It's literally just like inducing hypnagogia. It's kind of similar to Psythix's reverse blinking method that I talked about. I'm sorry, I'm dropping so many fucking like weird terms on you. It's kind of like reverse blinking to induce hypnagogia as you're falling asleep. I hope this all makes sense. But yeah, I couldn't find really more information on this Cloud guy. He kind of went by many different names, like Cloud de Contrecoeur, Cloud Rafat, which I think was his actual name. He also went by the name Serrano. He actually has a fucking Wikipedia page. It's not really in depth, but he has a Wikipedia. So he was kind of known within like, I don't know, a fucking community he was known in, but he wrote articles on like hallucinations. He also wrote a thing on how combining valerian essential oil with lavender essential oil, which are two oils that anyone can buy. He said combining these, he happened to realize these helped generate hallucinations when he sat in the dark after having these two essential oils. And I was reading up about those essential oils and I couldn't find any other shit on that. So this guy was basically making like potion fucking, but he was making magic potions and shit, combining stuff, and like he wrote something on that shitty website about how this induced hallucinations or something. So his whole thing is just interesting, and he kind of, I gather he kind of had some cult following, and he was really active on like certain online communities. And I found one blog post after he died in, I think, 2002, rip Cloud, rip Serrano. He died from a heart attack, unfortunately. And I saw this article was saying like, fucking long live the king or some shit or some shit like that. And I'm talking about how around when he was dying, his computer got hacked by a bunch of viruses or some shit, because he made all these enemies because he was really like active in political spaces and fighting against a lot of people. So he was involved in all this kind of crazy shit. But I guess this is just another hallucination tutorial to add to our arsenal, okay? We got Mylinus's advanced vision control, which is controlling the static behind your closed eyelids. We got Psythix's reverse blinking to generate hypnagogic imagery. Now we got fucking Cloud's method of just observing the darkness and kind of entering a pre-hallucogenic state. But shit, I don't know. I maybe need to make a hallucination tutorial tier list. I feel like I'm becoming one of those people that you start listening to, and you're like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Is he schizophrenic? You know those YouTube videos where some dude just yapping random shit for like fucking 20 minutes? Hopefully I'm not becoming that. I'm not crazy, okay? I am perfectly sane. But this whole thing's interesting. I'll send you the links for this, of course. Try it because it is actually fun observing the darkness, and it also works as like a meditative exercise as well. So when I talked about before meditating and kind of just like focusing on your breath with your eyes closed or open or whatever, focusing on just the darkness behind your eyelids, it's the same thing, because meditating is just focusing on one thing at once, right? So if you're gonna focus on the darkness, you're meditating and you're also doing this hallucination exercise at the same time. Of course, this will probably be easier when you're going to sleep because your mind is more prone to generate hallucinations then. So if you do that, let me know. Dislike the video, leave me a mean comment, unsubscribe. Farewell. Do not join the Discord. Never join the Discord, and give me your thoughts on Playboi Carti's new album. Okay, goodbye.